LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 3rd edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 11 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. I have a couple political comedy sources. I have a brief clip of Bill Maher's monologue from HBO's Real Time about Trump's racism or stupidity about racism, I guess, which sort of from Friday foreshadowed the main topic of the Sunday news programs, which was racism, although it was mostly focused on the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, and his scandal. I don't know if he's resigned yet, but I think they actually focused too much on that scandal because I think he's going to be resigning very quickly and it will be old news very quickly. And sort of the elephant in the room when discussing racism, the Republican elephant in the room, I guess, is Donald Trump's racism, which, like I said, Bill Maher jokes about, and is the subject of a couple of the news analysis clips, and specifically the clip from Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, who may be running for president in 2020. But the real political comedy is actually one of the two clips I took from Donald Trump's Super Bowl interview with CBS's Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, interviewing him, where he actually almost seems to take credit for solving racism, or at least racism with police and the criminal justice system. There's a little bit of hyperbole in the Trump solved racism title, but he does kind of do that. And the interview, and you'll see Margaret Brennan has sort of a softball or maybe soft touch follow-up, depending. Well, we'll talk about that when we get to that clip. And that's, I think I pretty much explained the topic. And you can also follow along with my list of 11 clips here at a link I put down in the video description. You can get the clip list. My notes sometimes aren't completely understandable, but you should at least be able to figure out who's speaking in each clip and what the topic is. And like I said, the first clip is about 45 seconds from Bill Maher's monologue last Friday, which didn't cover really the Ralph Northam topic or racism so much, but it did sort of, Trump's racism is such a prevalent topic that it just kind of came up serendipitously in the monologue and the jokes you can hear that I will discuss with you after we watch them together over here.
It went to a different level this week. A different level. I mean, besides the lies and the crazy, he is just aggressively stupid. I mean, it's Black History Month, so he went into the Rose Garden and pardoned a bucket of chicken. I mean, he knows nothing about black people. Today, he gave a shout out to Malcolm X. And then he sat down for a lengthy interview with the New York Times. There were no survivors.
So it's not the New York Times interview that I'm taking my first and last clip from. It's the CBS Face the Nation interview with Donald Trump. I'm a little bit nervous about this because the two big copyright fights I've gotten into in the last few years have been with CBS over clips I've taken of their exclusive footage of Donald Trump. One was an interview, one was actually from the 2016 election period where the CBS debate, and they really went all the way through the DMC takedown and counter notice, and they were threatening me, and so I still took two Donald Trump clips from today's interview just because I think that I have a fair use media criticism and political analysis reason. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to criticize Margaret Brennan's interviewing technique here. You can help me with the fair use argument, by the way, by also criticizing the clip as we watch it together in the live comments, because that actually counts. And you'll see here Margaret Brennan asked Donald Trump, does he understand why it was that the players were kneeling in the NFL? And he actually seems to claim that first he calls judicial reform and then criminal judicial reform. He's talking about criminal justice reform, which there was this bipartisan bill that passed, but it didn't solve everything. It was actually a fairly minor reform in the federal system, but he takes credit for it. Even Jared Kushner had something to do with it, I guess, but it was also a bipartisan group of legislators. And then by the end of this clip, you'll see he's like taking credit for basically solving the racism in the criminal justice system that made police officers, made NFL players protesting about police officer racism and racism in the criminal justice system. And then when Margaret Brennan doesn't really respond to that pretty outlandish claim in this clip, and instead she has sort of a softball, maybe soft touch follow-up about, well, most 63% or whatever of Americans don't think you're handling racism or race very well. And is that really the best follow-up? And Donald Trump's response to all that is, well, black unemployment's really low, so how can I be a racist? And I think I pretty much pre-criticized the clip. It's 3 minutes, 11 seconds that we'll watch together over here.
The kneeling position you've taken and the controversy around it. Do you think that the players who did kneel had a point? I mean, are you sensitive at all to players like Colin Kaepernick who point out that the majority of victims of police violence are black?
Well, I'm the one that had passed judicial reform. And if you look at what I did, criminal judicial reform and what I've done, President Obama tried, they all tried, everybody wanted to do it, and I got it done. And I've been, really, a lot of people in the NFL have been calling and thanking me for it.
Really?
They have been calling and thanking. You know that people have been trying to get that taken care of, and it's now signed into law and affects tremendous numbers of people and very good people. I think that when you want to protest, I think that's great, but I don't think you do it at the sake of our flag, at the sake of our national anthem. Absolutely.
But do I understand you saying there, though, that you still are sensitive, though? I mean, you understand the motivation for the protest, though you don't like the form of it.
A lot of it is having to do with reform, from what I understand, whether it's criminal justice or whatever it may be. And they have different versions, and everybody seemed to have a different version of it. But a lot of it had to do with that, and I took care of that. I think that people have to, at all times, respect our flag and at all times respect our national anthem and our country. And I think there are plenty of places and times you can protest, and you can do a lot, but you can't do that. That's my opinion.
In a CBS poll we just took, 63% of Americans say they disapprove about how you're handling issues of race in the U.S.
Well,
what do you
I
think
that what has happened is very interesting. The economy is so good right now. You saw the jobs report just came out, 304,000 added jobs, which is a shocker for the month, a shocker to a lot of people. They thought it was going to be half that number. The African Americans have the best employment numbers in the history of our country. Hispanic Americans have the best employment numbers in the history of our country. Asian Americans, the best in the history of our country. You look at women, the best in 61 years. And our employment numbers are phenomenal, the best in over 50 years. So I think I've been given a lot of credit for that. And in terms of race, a lot of people are saying, well, this is something very special, what's happening.
So, because when colleagues of yours, even like Republican Senator Tim Scott, he said Donald Trump is not racist, but he said you're racially insensitive.
Well, I have a great relationship with Tim and certainly with his state, South Carolina. And where we do very well. And I think if you look at the numbers for African American unemployment, best numbers they've had, literally the best numbers they've had in history. And I think they like me a lot, and I like them a lot.
Would you let your son Barron play football?
And if you want to watch the entire CBS Face the Nation interview of Donald Trump, including his answer to whether he would let his son Barron play football, which is a fairly reasonable answer to that question anyway, there's a link down in the video description to the entire Face the Nation set of clips on YouTube. I believe you can watch the entire interview for free, and I recommend that you do so. one of my fair use arguments actually is that my program is not a substitute for watching the news programs that I comment on. It's a different transform product. Just want to point that out to CBS and the CBS lawyer that I corresponded with over the last few years. And like I said before I showed the clip, I pretty much pre-criticized it, but I think you can see there that Margaret Brennan, she didn't say Trump was racist. She said, Tim Scott says you're not racist, but you're racially insensitive. Was that the best she could do? Because, I've been saying Trump has a long history of racism. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen this tweet I put out like 10 days ago or a couple weeks ago. This was when the MAGA teens were at the Lincoln Memorial were in the news, and I said, and people were saying, is wearing a MAGA hat racist? Well, you may not be racist if you wear a MAGA hat, but you're definitely okay with supporting someone with a long history of racism. And then I link there to a New York Times article from a while back, the definitive list of Trump's racist history going back decades, and I put a link to that tweet down in the video description that will take you to that New York Times article. I think several months back when, or is it over a year ago now, when Trump made the shithole countries comment, is Trump racist was like a topic in the news, and I think I linked to a Mother Jones article with another long list of Trump's history. And the question, is he racist in his heart? You'll see Chuck Todd asked Sherrod Brown that question in clip 7. I'm about to get to clip 3 here, but clip 7 when we get to that. And I mean, does it really matter? I mean, if he has a long history of acting in a racist way, I mean, I suppose he could be like pretending to be racist for political purposes, but eventually aren't you like who you pretend to be? If you like act in a racist way, can't you? I mean, does it really matter if in your heart you're not really racist? I don't know. That you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But now I'm going to get to the news summaries. And there are 4 of them. All 4 of the programs, except for CBS's Face the Nation, covered the Ralph Northam medical school yearbook controversy. And it was their top story. And like I said, I think it may have been overcovered because I bet by next Sunday, Ralph Northam is going to be gone from the political scene. I don't think he can. I even saw some tweet a couple hours ago that he was having some emergency meeting with his staff. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. There's some like people saying that our news cycle is so fast and there's so many scandals that if he just hunkers down, the focus will move past him. But I don't think so. If you watch these next 4 news summaries, it's basically everyone is coming out against him. And like I said, the news programs in various ways did cover that like Republican elephant in the room, Trump's racism, that I just explained by referencing the New York Times list and the Mother Jones list and that tweet I put out back on January 21st, was it? Yeah, or 22nd. So you know the basis for why I say Trump has a long history of racism. And you'll see Chuck Todd in the end of this news summary, he does mention that Democrats, their political response to what's happening with the Democratic governor of Virginia has a lot to do with how they want to take on Trump's racism. And I will discuss that a little more with you after we watch that first of the 4 news summaries over here.
Good Sunday morning. When Ralph Northam beat Ed Gillespie in Virginia in 2017, it was in a racially charged governor's race that Northam won thanks in part to strong support from African-American voters.
Ralph believes that if we're going to talk about our history, then we should do it in a way that heals, not in a way that wounds, not in a way that divides.
Now his career may be over after this photo from Northam's medical school yearbook page, which emerged late Friday. Within hours, Northam apologized, writing, "I am deeply sorry for the decision I made to appear as I did in this photo and for the hurt that decision caused then and now." But yesterday, a reversal. Northam said he'd never seen the yearbook before, and he claimed he was not in the photo.
This was not my picture. I was not in that costume, either as black-faced or as KKK, and it's not me.
Northam conceded that people will find it difficult to believe him. Then, perhaps underscoring that prediction, He revealed that he had worn blackface before.
That same year, I did participate in a dance contest in San Antonio, in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume. I look back now and regret that I did not understand the harmful legacy of an action like that.
Northam's political future is clearly in peril. Virtually the entire Democratic establishment, including Virginia's 2 Democratic senators, has called for his resignation. And Northam's press conference only accelerated those calls. Pretty much the only Democrat we haven't heard from is former President Barack Obama. It's possible that 10 or 20 years ago, a politician like Northam could have apologized his way out of this. But the political climate has clearly changed. Democrats in particular are showing zero tolerance, especially among their own, for behavior that they have condemned President Trump for. And if Northam won't go on his own, what do Democrats do? Joining me now are 2 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Karen Bass of California is the...
I don't have any clips from those members of the Congressional Black Caucus, but I think I pretty much gave my media criticism of that clip. I thought generally was good, and you saw how he pointed out the importance of how Democrats are attacking Donald Trump's racism in their handling of this weird incident with the governor of Virginia. And I watched his whole press conference. There are a lot of things that didn't really make sense. Like I said, I think he's going to be gone very quickly. His story had holes in it. He's basically lost the support of everyone in Virginia that he has to work with. I'll show a few clips of Terry McCaullife after the Sherrod Brown clip, and one of which I actually agree with Terry McCaullife, where he explains why it is that Ralph Northam has to resign as governor, and he will resign. There's some other things from that set of clips I'm going to show of Terry McCaullife that I don't agree with, especially there'll be this whole infanticide, 3rd trimester abortion controversy thing that I don't think Terry McCaullife or Jake Tapper really handled correctly. But like I said, that's coming up. But now I have 3 more news summaries. The next one is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. What I like about this is they show this ambiguous clip about moonwalking that I saw get played in I think maybe the wrong way, and that wasn't included in the NBC Meet the Press clip, which was otherwise pretty good, but I will discuss that with you and that moonwalking ambiguity after we watch the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, narrated by George Stephanopoulos over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It was an ugly reminder of America's racist past. That 1984 photo from the medical school yearbook page of Virginia's Democratic Governor, Ralph Northam. When it surfaced Friday on the website Big League Politics, condemnation from fellow Democrats came hard and fast. Northam acknowledged the photo and apologized twice, saying it does not represent the person I am today. But by Friday night, his fate seemed sealed, resignation inevitable. Then came that dramatic about-face on Saturday. At a packed press conference in Richmond, Northam disavowed the yearbook photo.
When I was confronted with the images yesterday, I was appalled that they appeared on my page, but I believe then and now that I am not either of the people in that photo. Okay. There is no way that I have ever been in a KKK uniform. I am not the person in that uniform, and I am not the person to the right.
But there was that one time.
That same year, I did participate in a dance contest in San Antonio, in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume. But there's a contrast between the blackface and someone standing there in a Ku Klux Klan outfit and me dressed up in a Michael Jackson costume for a dance contest. And again, they're both wrong, but I would hope people would see the contrast.
And for a moment, Northam even seemed to contemplate a demonstration.
You said that the competition in San Antonio was a dance competition?
Yes.
And it was that you danced the moonwalk?
That's right.
Are you still able to moonwalk?
Inappropriate circumstances.
My wife says inappropriate circumstances.
Any support Northam had evaporated after that performance. Virginia's Democrats, led by Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, all agree he has to go. But as we come on the air this morning, Northam is still governor. Our first guest this morning, the president of the NAACP, Derek Johnson. Mr. Johnson.
And I don't have any clips of from ABC News guests or from I don't have any from Fox News Sunday either. Those two news summaries are the only clips I have from those two programs. Like I said, I thought that was a pretty good news summary, like the NBC News Meet the Press, and I appreciated especially that clip of the moment where it looked like the governor of Virginia might actually moonwalk at his press conference. And I do think that that is accurate, because he kind of like looked over to the floor like, could I moonwalk here? Even though I don't know why the reporter asked that question. You'll see Terry McCaullife later say it was an inappropriate question, but a lot of people heard what his wife said and what he said there and thought that she was saying that for him to moonwalk there was inappropriate circumstances. But I actually thought when I heard it, and I think he thought because he was smiling, that his answer to the question was 3 words, not 2 words, inappropriate as one word and circumstances as the other, but 3 words, inappropriate circumstances. His wife said, yes, he can moonwalk in appropriate circumstances, which I guess kind of has the implication that these are not appropriate circumstances to moonwalk, but it's kind of a weird ambiguity in the news conference. Did she say 3 words, inappropriate circumstances, or 2 words, inappropriate circumstances? I'm actually going to show you a clip a little later where Jake Tapper asks Terry McAuliffe about that moment, and so you can watch it again and let me know either now or then whether it was his wife and he were saying 3 words or 2 words. It's one of those weird ambiguities, but now I'm going to show the Jake Tapper State of the Union news summary, and the State of the Union this week shaking our heads because of what Ralph Northam, governor of Virginia, is doing, and also, like the 2 previous news summaries, points out the weird contradiction between what he said on Friday, that he admitted he was in the photo, and then Saturday he came out and said, I'm not in the photo. And if you listen to the news conference very carefully on Saturday, he never really even admitted that he had admitted he was in the photo. He never said that. He said, I apologize because I wanted to reach out to people and say how horrific it was. And then later I looked at the photo more closely and realized I'm not in the photo, but he never really admitted that he had admitted it. And that contradiction is again pointed out in the State of the Union news summary that I will talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is shaking our heads. The Virginia governor, Democrat Ralph Northam, is ignoring calls for his resignation by his fellow Democrats from the top to the bottom of his party, demands that only intensified after the governor bizarrely changed his explanation about that racist photo from his 1984 medical school yearbook page. Now Northam insists he's not in the photo, which depicts someone in blackface next to a person dressed in Ku Klux Klan robes.
I am very secure. I finally had a chance to sit down and look at the photograph in detail. It is definitely not me. I can tell by looking at it.
That was a total contradiction of what Northam had admitted just hours before when he said he was, quote, deeply sorry for the decision I made to appear as I did in this photo, unquote. Northam did reveal yesterday his vivid memory of wearing blackface on a different occasion that year at a dance contest where he dressed as Michael Jackson and colored his face with shoe polish, marking the first time in American political history that a politician attempted to explain his innocence regarding one racist blackface incident by pointing to another one that he recalled participating in. Northam is now asking for the opportunity to earn Virginians' forgiveness, something the state's top Democrats, including both Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, former Governors Wilder and McCaullife, the current state attorney general, and the entire state Democratic caucus, said was not possible. Joining me now is former Virginia Governor Democrat Terry McAuliffe. Northam was his lieutenant.
And like I said, I will have 3 clips of Terry McAuliffe coming up. One talking about why Ralph Northam should resign, one talking about that ambiguous inappropriate circumstances moonwalking clip, and then one talking about whether Ralph Northam earlier in the week came out in favor of infanticide, which the answer, according to my analysis, will be no. And I don't understand why so many people think the answer is yes, and I will explain why when we... But those are clips 8, 9, and 10, and the next clip is the final news summary, clip 6 here, which is the Fox News Sunday news summary. And actually, this one is very similar to the other news programs. Fox News, loved reporting the Democrat involved in racist medical yearbook scandal and they just reported it as kind of straight news because, as they say, when your opponent is in the middle of committing political suicide, you just get out of the way, and that's kind of what Fox News did in the story. Although I do have one little bit of Fox News bias I want to point out at the very end of this as to how they handled it in terms they normally go to the guests after the news summary, and they didn't, and I will explain why I think there might have been a nefarious motive behind that after we watch the 2-minute, 37-second Fox News summary from Chris Wallace handing it off to their reporter, Garrett Tenning, over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam is defying calls for his resignation from the Democratic Party in his own state and almost all the leading contenders for his party's 2020 presidential nomination. Northam says he is not one of the two people in a clearly racist photo in his 1984 medical school yearbook, and he is appealing to Virginia voters to give him some time to earn back their trust. We begin our coverage with the latest from Garrett Tenney, live outside the governor's mansion in Richmond. Garrett.
Chris, in less than 24 hours, Governor Ralph Northam went from "I'm sorry" to "it wasn't me." And his explanation has done very little to quell the calls for his resignation.
I am deeply sorry. I cannot change the decisions I made, nor can I undo the harm my behavior caused then and today.
Clearly racist and offensive. On Friday, that's how Governor Northam described this picture in his 1984 medical school yearbook, which shows one man wearing blackface and another in a KKK costume. On Saturday, Northam said he never believed it was him in the picture and only apologized because people were upset.
Last night, I finally had a chance to sit down and look at the photograph in detail. It is definitely not me. I can tell by looking at it.
Northam admitted he did wear blackface for a dance competition that same year, dressing up like Michael Jackson. He is facing a growing wave of calls from across the political spectrum for him to resign, including these from the campaign trail.
He should resign. I saw the photo when after I saw you guys last night. So disturbing, so racist.
I've called for him to resign. He should.
If Northam were to resign, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax would become the second African-American governor of the Commonwealth. In a statement, he said, "I cannot condone the actions from his past that at the very least suggest a comfort with Virginia's darker history of white supremacy, racial stereotyping, and intimidation." Governor Northam said he is launching an investigation to determine who the two men in the photo are and to prove to the public that he isn't one of them, using facial recognition technology. Chris?
Garrett Tenney reporting from Richmond. Garrett, thanks for that. We want to discuss this now with our Sunday group who represent a range of political opinions. Former Republican Congressman.
Well, sort of a range of political opinions on the panel discussion. And later, Chris Wallace in the program actually says, normally we don't go to the panel right away. I'm glad we did this time. And it's because they never brought up this topic with any of the guests, including Republican and Democratic members of Congress. And I think my theory is maybe they did that because they didn't want that, Republican elephant in the room to come up, the racism of Donald Trump and other Republican, the whole Steve King thing that they tried to keep that out of Fox News Sunday and from the Fox News viewers as much as I could tell. One thing I actually liked in that news summary that wasn't in the other news summaries was they mentioned the lieutenant governor of Virginia being this African American Justin Fairfax, and that is like the biggest karma of this whole situation, especially because from what I understand, Virginia has a one-term. Their Virginia governors have a single 6-year term. That's their term limit. But if Justin Fairfax takes over as governor when Ralph Northam pretty much inevitably resigns, he gets to fill out the rest of his term, which is like 5 years, plus then he gets to run for governor again for a full term of his own, which would be like another 6 years. So in a way, it's almost like Virginia reparations for the history of racial injustice in Virginia, which is long and nasty. And that actually leads me to this next clip. You'll see Sherrod Brown is asked about this. Why is it that blackface is, isn't it strange how times have changed and now people can't get away with blackface, or whatever the initial question is from Chuck Todd here on Meet the Press to Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio who's considering running for president. And I think he gives a really great answer, both about the history of racism in Virginia and Trump's history of racism that is kind of similar to this tweet I put out that links to the New York Times list. And like I said, down in the video description, I put a link to that tweet if you want to see the long list of Donald Trump's racism. And one of the cool things about this clip from Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, is if you listen carefully, you will hear a reference to this book, which I have had over my left shoulder for like almost 6 years now, doing LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. If you read one book, if you haven't read this book and you're going to read one book this year or any year, read this book. It's if you want to understand why Donald Trump has not solved the racism in the criminal justice system, the systematic racism in American society, that is a book you have to read. And if you listen carefully to Sherrod Brown in his answer here, I give him extra bonus points. I hadn't really considered supporting Sherrod Brown, but at least he mentions Michelle Alexander, the New Jim Crow, which has been right here all this time. And this is a great answer, I have to say, and I'll discuss it a little more after we watch it together over here.
What does it say that something like this is now, folks are now being held accountable for blackface in ways, frankly, that we didn't have that strong of a moral code, I would argue, in our politics until recently. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think this country hasn't dealt well with the issues of race. I mean, we have a president who's a racist, we have...
Let me pause you there. That's just that you believe in his heart he's a racist.
Oh, I don't know what in his heart means. I know that he built his political career knowing what he was doing on questioning the legitimacy and the birthplace of the President of the United States. I know early that there have been all kinds of news reports about what he did early in his career on housing. We know, read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, read The Color of Law about housing discrimination and decades and decades and decades of housing discrimination. And we know that the Trump family, including the now sitting president, played to that and deepened that. So these issues, this is not a Charlottesville was only a symptom and a more public viewing and outing, if you will, of the president's views about race. I mean, there's just no question about that. We know the president doesn't tell the truth frequently. Yep. We know he lies frequently, and we know of his racist comments and background.
You spent the last couple
and that's not even counting, Chuck. That's not even counting the policies of this administration. We have consent decrees all over this country, including in Cleveland. We have a Justice Department that's turned its back on it. We know about voter suppression. I was Secretary of State of Ohio. My job when I was Secretary of State was to encourage people of all races to vote, especially young people and especially young people of color. And we worked at that. We now have a government that suppresses the vote, and we know what happened in Georgia, and we know what happened in Florida.
One of the ways you've talked about your potential candidacy for president.
And then Chuck Todd talks about the potential candidacy of Sherrod Brown. He's doing this like dignity of work tour through the first primary states. So it actually seems likely he's going to run for president. And like I said, I hadn't really considered supporting him, but he does come from the swing state of Ohio, and he does get extra special bonus points for his mention of the new Jim Crow. And actually that entire answer was an excellent answer, especially that he wasn't afraid to say Donald Trump has a long history of racism. And like I said, there's a link down in the video description to that tweet that I just showed that leads to the New York Times list of decades of Trump history of racism. If you don't think that there is such a list or that it's fake news, well, go and look at the facts. You can rebut them down in the video description if you want, or down in the comment section if you want, but follow that link in the video description. And like I said, that was a great clip from one possible Democratic presidential contender. The next clip is another possible presidential contender, Terry McCaullife, former governor of Virginia. That's why his thoughts on Ralph Northam's situation are especially important, because he recently was governor of Virginia. These are three clips from Jake Tapper's interview of Terry McCaullife on CNN State of the Union, and I would call it like a good clip, a ambiguous clip, and then a bad clip. The first clip here, I think Terry McCaullife does a good job of explaining why it is that Ralph Northam has to resign, and also talking about the history of racism in Virginia. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch that 3-minute, 17-second clip from CNN State of the Union this morning together over here.
Northam was his lieutenant governor, and Governor McCaullife called for Northam's resignation on Friday. Governor McCaullife, thanks so much for joining us. Northam is now saying it's not him in the photo. Do you believe him?
It doesn't really matter what I believe or anyone else believes. When this first came out Friday afternoon, and Jake, when you invited me on the show, my wildest dreams never thought you and I would be having this conversation. So when the photo came out Friday afternoon, when it was sent to me, I said there is absolutely no way that Ralph Northam is in this picture. And then Friday evening, it came out that Ralph indeed was, he said, he was in the picture. And at that point, for me, morally, the only right thing to do, and it was hard. I called Ralph on Friday night. It was one of the hardest things I had to do. Was my lieutenant governor. We worked closely together. We did so many great things working together for the Commonwealth of Virginia. But once that picture where the blackface and the Klansman came out, there is no way you can continue to be the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have had a horrible and sordid past as it relates to race relations. We worked very hard, Ralph and I, over the last 5 years to move the state forward. If you remember, 1902, a state senator said that I'm putting a felon disenfranchisement in our Constitution, quote, to eliminate the darky from being a political factor in Virginia. I was proud to, 114 years later, give those felons their rights back. But we've worked hard in Virginia. So this is, I got to tell you, it's heartbreaking. It has been one of the worst 48 hours. But Virginia needs to come out of this stronger. I can't sit here and pretend and be in the steps of those individuals who have been offended by those photos.
Well, let me ask you.
I can't.
If it's not him in the photo, which is what he's saying, why do you still think he should resign?
Well, first he said it was Friday night. And if it wasn't him in the photo, he should have said that on Friday. I have no idea what was going on in the governor's office on Friday. I just, if you're not instinctively, you know if you put black paint on your face. You know if you put a hood on. And so if it isn't you, you come out with immediately and say, this is not me. So I can't understand what's going on, but I do know this. Ralph is a good, moral, decent man and may have made some mistakes in his past. We all have made mistakes. Ralph will do the right thing for the Commonwealth of Virginia. He will put Virginia first, and I think that will happen relatively soon. He's worked hard. You know, thanks to Ralph's efforts, we got Medicaid expansion done, but we have to move on. You cannot be the moral leader. I mean, we are now in crossover in Virginia where the legislation goes from the House and Senate back and forth. I can remember as governor, this is your busiest time.
Right.
You're working with your legislators to pass bills, kill bills. I mean, you've got to work as one unit to move your Commonwealth forward, and he's just not going to have that ability to do it. The head of the Black Caucus yesterday said if he doesn't resign, they'll move to remove him themselves from the legislature. So we just need to put this behind us. We need to move forward. And that's what we have to do.
So, like I said, that was the pretty good answer from Terry McCaullife. I've never been a big fan of Terry McCaullife, governor of Virginia. He used to be like the big fundraiser for the Clintons. Donald Trump is not a big fan of Terry McCaullife. That was one of his big attacks on Andrew McCabe, was that when his Andrew McCabe's wife ran for some office in Virginia, she got a big contribution from Terry McCaullife, which was really Hillary Clinton. And so anyway, I've never been a big fan of Terry McCaullife. I'm not going to be supporting Terry McCaullife if he decides to run for president in 2020, along with another 30 Democrats apparently running. But that was a pretty good answer. This next answer, like I said, is kind of ambiguous, and both in terms of Jake Tapper asking it and Terry McCaullife answering it, it's that ambiguous clip I was talking about before. This is your second chance to see it, where they ask Ralph Northam at his press conference, you know, can you still moonwalk? And he looks over at the floor. I'm pretty sure he considers moonwalking, and then his wife says, in appropriate circumstances. 3 words, in appropriate circumstances, or 2 words, in appropriate circumstances. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. It's like a conundrum, an enigma. It's totally ambiguous, and I've watched it so many times, and I can't tell you for sure which one it is, but you're going to see it again here. And there, it seems almost like they're assuming it's 2 words, inappropriate circumstances, which is why this is more of an ambiguous clip that I'll discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
I want you to watch a clip from yesterday's press conference, a question for Governor Northam. After he admitted that he did wear blackface, but not in that photo. He wore blackface as part of a Michael Jackson costume for a dance competition in San Antonio in 1984. Take a look.
Are you still able to moonwalk?
Inappropriate circumstances.
My wife says inappropriate circumstances.
So, as I don't need to tell you, Governor, there are a lot of people in Virginia and throughout the country who are really hurting because of this racist image. You just saw Governor Northam smiling, contemplating, showing the press his ability to moonwalk. Do you think that Governor Northam understands how serious this is and how much pain he's caused?
I think there is so much coming out. I mean, I winced when I saw that yesterday. First of all, totally inappropriate question from the reporter. We're talking about a very, very serious issue. And I agree with the First Lady of Virginia. I agree with Pam Northam. That was totally inappropriate. And I just think, Jake, he's sitting there and, you know, you just can't imagine what's going on in his mind today with everybody and calling for his resignation. And I just go back to the point, he has done so many great things for Virginia through the years. It doesn't matter whether he was in the photo or not in the photo at this point. We have to close that chapter. We have to move Virginia forward. Justin Fairfax, African-American lieutenant governor, will do a great job of bringing folks back together. But, you know, this is a part of chapter of Ralph's life. And as I say, he'll be remembered for so many great things. But he will also be remembered in a time of need that he chose the right moral course for Virginia. And he resigned and we moved forward.
Yeah, like I said, you can tell me what you think about the ambiguity and the inappropriate circumstances comment. And as to whether Ralph Northam is going to resign, like I said, I saw something in the last couple hours that he was having some emergency staff meeting. And I haven't checked the news in the last hour or so. You can let me know in the comment section, or for my recorded show viewers, is Ralph Northam may actually already be gone by the time you watch this program, because I think his political viability is long gone for the reasons that Terry McCaullife said in the clip before last. But the final Terry McCaullife clip I want to show is one I had to show because I watch a lot of Fox News. I watch MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN. I have all three of them recording all the time for at least all the live broadcasts. And I can't believe how many times I've seen on Fox News this week, before this whole Ralph Northam medical school yearbook racism scandal, Fox News was playing over and over again this fake news scandal about Ralph Northam being in favor of infanticide. There was this third trimester abortion bill in Virginia that basically made it, got rid of some of the over-regulation of third trimester abortions, which are already really rare, and it made it so that one doctor could certify it was necessary rather than 3 doctors. I think that was one of the changes. And Ralph Northam was talking about this on a radio show, and he was talking about, you'll see it even in the clip here, that at least on CNN's State of the Union here, Jake Tapper showed the entire clip. They actually cut out the beginning part a lot of times on Fox News, where he makes it clear he's talking about babies who are born with terminal problems, like multiple congenital abnormalities or anomalies, or babies who aren't going to make it. What does a doctor do in that situation? And you can hear that at the very beginning of the clip, and they make it seem like they're deciding to kill a born baby, when really they're talking to the parents about whether there should be heroic measures given to a baby that has problems that, you're just going to prolong the baby's life a very small amount with a lot of trauma from the treatment, and instead you can just make the baby comfortable until the inevitable occurs because of the multiple congenital problems. And I'll discuss that a little more after I show you this 1 minute 49 second final clip of Terry McCaullife talking to Jake Tapper over here.
I have to ask about another controversy in Virginia over legislation that would loosen restrictions on late-term abortions. I want you to take a listen to what Governor Northam said about third trimester abortions on a local radio show, WTOP, I believe.
It's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
Do you support this new legislation, and what was your reaction to the governor's comments there?
Absolutely not. And I think Ralph misspoke on that. No Democrat I know is for infanticide. None. I just don't know of anyone who is for it. Listen, Ralph was at my side. When I ran for governor 5 years ago and got inaugurated, it was the Republicans who were changing all the regulations to make clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics, put in more water fountains, more parking spaces, all to shut all of our clinics down. I'm very, very proud that I replaced the Board of Health, and working with Ralph, we got rid of all of those horrible regulations to shut our Planned Parenthood clinics down. So, that's the battle that we've been having in Virginia. Where we come from is, life of the mother in the last trimester. But I do not support that legislation, nor does Ralph. And I just think, he was speaking as a doctor, and what he was trying to say, I'll be honest, he was inartful, and that's not who he is.
Governor, obviously we asked you to come on the show to talk about...
That was a really bad answer from Terry McCaullife. I kind of explained it before the clip, and you heard he said that he was talking about non-viable fetuses or severe deformities. I actually, my dad, who sometimes watches the show, is a pediatric surgeon, and I have a memory like many years ago he actually did this presentation because of his experience taking care of newborns with multiple congenital anomalies. And I remember he did this presentation about how parents and doctors deal with this problem of, how much care do you give to a newborn that isn't going to survive very long, because sometimes that's just the way things work out. And that was obviously what Ralph Northam was talking about. I don't know why, because if you listen to the very beginning of the radio talk show clip there, that he obviously said, severe deformities or non-viable fetus, what happens when a baby like that is delivered. You resuscitate, he said resuscitate, and then have a conversation, a difficult conversation that no one ever wants to have about, like, what you do, what type of measures you take for a baby that has no chance to survive. And that's a terrible situation, but it's not infanticide, and I don't know why Terry McCaullife said it was. And I don't know, and on Fox News, I heard so many different programs, Straight News to Justice with Janine over the weekend, saying that was infanticide, and that's just ridiculous. And I don't know why Terry McCaullife didn't do a better job there. So that was the last clip on the main topic. The next clip is a bonus Trump interview clip with Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation on Russia. This is like Trump's defense of the Mueller investigation. I believe the original question from Margaret Brennan is, what surprised you about Mueller's questions? And he just goes into Russia's a big hoax, and she mentions all the people who've been indicted, and, well, you'll see. This isn't so much like a softball interview or a soft touch interview like I was complaining about the first Margaret Brennan interview clip. This one I would criticize, for my fair use media purposes, I would criticize this one as being more of a scattershot interview that Margaret Brennan, I guess, decided to ask a lot of questions about many different topics until the very end of the interview. And again, I recommend you watch the full interview at the link to CBS's Face the Nation I put in the video description. At the very end, she says, like, oh, I hear the helicopters, you got to go, so thanks for your time. She's very respectful, and she asks about Roger Stone in this clip, you'll see. And she lets Trump get away. I'm pre-criticizing the clip, but she lets Trump get away with saying, oh, he was out of the campaign really early, and never asks about, well, Stone had conversations with you very frequently, including at these key times when, like you said, Russia, if you're listening, get Hillary's emails. And he talked to Roger Stone right before that famous quote. I think that's from July 2016, if I'm remembering correctly. And July and August, you'll see Margaret Brennan never follows up because she asks question after question, and she just moves on to the release of the Mueller report. This is the final news clip I'm going to show you. Like I said, it's on Russia, not racism, but I think you're seeing here how Donald Trump is going to react to the Mueller report. At one point in here, he also seems to say that the Mueller report, he's already read the Mueller report because he's talking about what's in it, and the Mueller report never says this. And Margaret Brennan doesn't follow up on any of that. That's my media criticism that makes this a fair use clip. Like I said, she just moves on to, are you going to release the Mueller report? And in her scattershot approach, like I said, in the final news clip, 2 minutes and 28 seconds from CBS's Face the Nation this morning, over here.
Palm Beach, Florida. What surprised you about some of the questions that Robert Mueller asked you?
Well, look, the Russia thing is a hoax. I have been tougher on Russia than any president, maybe ever, but than any president.
But when it comes to the investigation that the special counsel is conducting, I mean, 34 people have been charged here.
Excuse me.
Guilty
Okay, you
pleas.
ready? Okay, you ready? Of the 34 people, many of them were bloggers from Moscow, or they were people that had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with what they're talking about, or they were people that got caught telling a fib or telling a lie. I think it's a terrible thing that's happened to this country because this investigation is a witch hunt. It's a terrible witch hunt, and it's a disgrace.
Do you think it should be
When you
made
look at
public?
General Flynn, where the FBI said he wasn't lying, but Robert Mueller said he was, and they took a man and destroyed his life. When you look at so many of the things that have happened, why didn't they go after Hillary Clinton for her emails? She had 33,000 emails that were deleted after receiving a subpoena from Congress.
And according to the special counsel, they were
Why-
posted on WikiLeaks, and your friend Roger Stone was just indicted for his involvement.
First of all, Roger
there and
Stone
for
didn't
lying.
work on the campaign, except way, way at the beginning, long before we're talking about. Roger is somebody that I've always liked, but a lot of people liked Roger. Some people probably don't like Roger, but Roger Stone's somebody I've always liked. I mean, Roger's a character. But Roger was not, I don't know if you know this or not, Roger wasn't on my campaign, except way at the beginning.
Right.
So it's all, and yet you will ask me a question like that. Wasn't involved in my campaign.
Would you pardon him?
Have not thought about it. It looks like he's defending himself very well. But you have to get rid of the Russia witch hunt because it is indeed. And
Because you
remember,
think
remember this. Remember this. There's been no president that has been tougher on Russia than Donald Trump.
Would you make the Mueller report public because you say there's nothing in there?
It's totally
Congress
up
can
to the Attorney
subpoena it
General.
anyway, though.
Totally up to the
But what do
Attorney
you want
General.
them to do?
Even the Mueller report said it had nothing to do with the campaign. When you look at some of the people and the events, it had nothing to do.
You wouldn't have a problem if it
Excuse me.
became public.
Excuse me. No, it's up to the Attorney General. I don't know. It depends. I have no idea what it's going to say.
Okay.
So far, this thing's been a total witch hunt, and it doesn't implicate me in any way. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. There was no nothing. Doesn't implicate me in any way. But I think it's a disgrace.
What would make you use the U.S. military in Venezuela?
And you can see Margaret Brennan there moves on to a Venezuela question. Definitely a scattershot approach. Didn't follow up on the specific calls from Roger Stone. Like I said before, I showed the clip even when Trump said, you know, he was off the campaign early, let him get away with saying, I've been tougher on Russia than any president ever, without any follow-up. And that's not really true. In a lot of ways, he's been Vladimir Putin's dream. And in the cases where he has been tough on Russia, it's been more because of what Congress has required him to do, and even then there's been some weird like back channel sanctions relief for Oleg Deripaska. And anyway, if you've been following the show for the last few months, you've heard a lot about all of that. And what was the other things you didn't follow up on there that he said that was ridiculous? Whatever, now it's like escaping my mind. Maybe you can help me out in the live comments as to what the other thing was there that Margaret Brennan didn't follow up on that Trump said that was ridiculous at the end of that clip. That he's been the toughest on Russia. And then he also said, what was it? She didn't follow up on the Roger Stone. And then there was some third thing she didn't follow up on. But like I said, it was pretty scattershot approach. I wish I could remember, but I don't have any notes on that. And that was the final news clip. Let me check. Anyone have any ideas down? Anyway, I see Sexy Bob is only getting a few video frames, so no help from him, no help down there. But I don't know. Should I? Never mind. It's not that important. I had some third point I was going to make about that, but I think it's enough fair use media criticism and political analysis so that I can make a good case should CBS come after me for the two very brief, newsworthy Donald Trump interview clips that I used from their Super Bowl interview of the president. I hope you appreciated those two clips and the other 9 clips I picked out for you for my Trump solved racism topic. Other than that last Russia clip, all the other news clips were about Trump's racism, and I hope if I've convinced you of nothing else, it's that Donald Trump has a long history of racism. Whether he's racist in his heart, like Chuck Todd asked Sherrod Brown in one of his follow-up questions, that's almost beside the point. If you have a long history of acting in a racist way, it doesn't really matter what's in your heart. That's at least my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is. You can help me out by subscribing to my channel, especially if you want to see the special other videos I put out. This last week I put out a 13+ minute video of an ACLU press conference of the local Black Lives Matter Sacramento suing the local sheriff over Facebook deletions. That's an interesting First Amendment topic that you get to see if you are subscribed to my channel. So hit that subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up too. If you give a thumbs up to my videos, you'll probably see them in your YouTube feed. If you want to support my videos in a way more financially than that, I notice I've had 4 super chat contributions today during the program, and I appreciate all of I'm trying to get you a screenshot of that. I should update my software so that I can get you automatic screenshots. But here, let me quickly show you a screenshot of all my super chat contributors here. Where is that? Here it is. So thanks for those to those 3 people for those 4 contributions, especially that extra contribution at the end for the inappropriate circumstances ambiguity that I haven't been able to figure out. I haven't even seen anyone else comment on that, so that's also something special you get from watching my show. And another special thing you get from watching my show is the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. Here's 18 seconds of them right before I started the show. They were milling about, waiting for their food. I fed them, or actually my wife fed them right after this clip was taken. Over here. So that's the brief Dash and Sandy interaction outside my studio right over there. And right now, Dash is hiding off somewhere, and Sandy is right there snoring, lying down as usual. If I'm thinking this might be the year 2019 where I actually get a Sandy cam that I can hook into this whole system and then switch over to the live Sandy cam at any point. I think I might set that as one of my goals on Patreon if I get to a certain Patreon support level. And that's another way you can support my videos on Patreon. There's a link down in the video description at the $5 support level, either on Patreon or directly through a PayPal link down in the video description. At the $5 level, you get this #LiberalViewer sticker. At the $10 level, you get this handy dandy pocket constitution from the ACLU that also has a know your rights with the police section and other things at the end. So that's another way you can support my videos. And like I said, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I should be making some edited produced videos in February. I have a few other things coming up in the next several days, but this could be the week, but it will definitely be in February. I'm hoping to make that Turn the Supreme Court Up to 11 video this month. I've talked about that for a long time. So if you want to see that, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. And until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.